my friend Garrett was the one who booked the motel. I want to make that clear because I would never have chosen it, and he still feels bad about it, which he should. We were driving from Phoenix to a wedding in Albuquerque, a 12-hour round trip that we decided to split over 2 nights to make it less brutal. Garrett found us a motel just outside of Socorro, New Mexico, something like $60 a night, and I will admit, the pictures looked fine. Sometimes the pictures look fine. It was called something forgettable, the desert view, the roadside something, I can't even remember. Single-story U-shaped layout, parking in the middle courtyard, maybe 20 rooms total. It was November, cold for New Mexico, and the place looked like it was running at maybe 30% capacity. Our rooms were next to each other. Garrett was in 7, I was in 8. We got in around 10 p.m., tired, split a bag of chips from a gas station, and agreed to be up by 7 to make the second leg. I noticed the maid's cart when I walked to my room. It was parked against the exterior wall between rooms 11 and 12 at the far end of the row. This struck me as a little strange. It was 10 at night, and housekeeping carts are a daytime thing, but I figured they kept it outside to save storage space, or someone had just forgotten it. I didn't think much of it. My room smelled like bleach and was colder than it should have been, even accounting for the outdoor temperature. The heater worked, but took a long time to get going. I got into bed fully dressed, read for about 20 minutes, and fell asleep around 11:30. I woke up at 1:17 a.m. to wheels, slow rolling wheels on asphalt. The sound of a cart being pushed, then it stopped, then nothing. I listened for a few minutes, heard nothing else, and went back to sleep. Cart with bad wheels being moved by a late shift staffer, I figured, or the wind pushing it. That seemed plausible. At 2:33 a.m. I woke up again, knocking. 4 knocks, steady, on what I thought was my door. I sat up and waited. Nothing. I figured it was Garrett's door. His was right next to mine, and sound carried weird in these places. Maybe he'd walked out for something and locked himself out. I lay back down, then 4 more knocks. Closer, I thought, or maybe that was just me being awake and paranoid. I got up and looked through the peephole. The courtyard was lit by one overhead light that turned everything yellowish and flat. Garrett's door was closed. The parking lot had 4 or 5 cars. The maid's cart, and here's the thing. The maid's cart was now parked directly outside my door. 6 or 8 feet away in the courtyard, the bottom shelves loaded with folded towels and small bottles. Right there. It had been at the other end of the building 3 hours ago. Now it was outside my room. I told myself there was an explanation. A staffer moved it. The wheels caught on a slope and it rolled. The wind, though, again, it was a cold, still night and the cart had 4 wheels on flat asphalt. But I told myself something. I got a glass of water, checked my door lock, and went back to bed. I'm an idiot. I know. At 3:51 a.m., a smell woke me up. I know that sounds strange, being woken by a smell, but it was strong enough. It was bleach and something else underneath it. Something organic and wrong. Like when you open a container that's been closed too long and there's something inside that started to turn. I sat up in bed and the smell was thick enough that I thought something was actually wrong with the plumbing, or a pipe had broken. I went to the bathroom and checked. Nothing. The smell wasn't in the bathroom. It was coming from the window. The window faced the courtyard. I went to it. There was a gap in the curtains and I looked out. The cart was right outside my window, not 6 feet away. Right there, maybe 18 inches from the glass. And something was on it that hadn't been there before. On the top shelf, where they usually put the folded towels, it was a room key. A plastic key card, sitting on top of the towel pile. I saw that and something in my body just locked up. I backed away from the window. I called Garrett. It took him 4 tries to answer. I told him what was happening and to come to my door, from inside, through his room, not outside. He thought I was losing it. He came to his window first, looked at the cart, and went quiet in a way that told me he didn't think I was losing it anymore. We called 911 at 3:58 a.m. and stayed on the line. I did not open my door. 2 officers arrived around 4:15. They checked the courtyard, checked the cart. The key card on top of it, it was keyed to room 8. My room. They checked the motel records, and that key had been coded at check-in, standard. But the front desk was unstaffed overnight. and the officer said the key coding machine was accessible to anyone who got behind the desk. They did a sweep of the property. In the supply room at the far end of the building, behind a stack of linen, they found a sleeping bag and a small backpack with food and a change of clothes. Someone had been staying there, inside the motel, in the supply room. For how long? Nobody could tell us. They never found who it was. The backpack had no ID. The sleeping bag was generic. Whoever it was had left the property before the officers got there or had stayed very hidden during the sweep. The motel owner was called and came out around 5 a.m. He was angry in a way that seemed genuine. He had no idea anyone had been living in that room. Garrett and I drove the rest of the way to Albuquerque in the dark, rather than staying. I've thought about the key card a lot. It was sitting on the cart outside my window like a message or an invitation. Come out, or maybe I can come in. Either way, someone wanted me to know they had a key to my room. They didn't use it, they just wanted me to know. That's the part I can't rationalize. It wasn't random. It was deliberate and patient, and whoever it was had been watching which room I went into, had gotten my key coded, and had decided at some point in the night to put it somewhere I'd see it. We didn't go back for the wedding gifts we'd left in the room. We bought new ones. Garrett paid for them. Like I said, he still feels bad. I don't stay in single-story exterior access motels anymore. If I can't see the front desk from my room door, I keep looking. It's probably excessive, but I keep thinking about the smell that woke me up, and the cart getting closer across the night, and the moment I looked through that gap in the curtains and saw a key card that, opened my door sitting on a shelf where someone had left it for me to find. I don't think I was supposed to see it. I think I woke up earlier than they planned. I work nights, so I keep weird hours even when I'm not working. My sleep schedule is genuinely a mess, and I've made peace with that. What I haven't made peace with, and this is relevant, is the week I spent at the Comfort Stay Suites in Macon, Georgia, waiting for my new apartment to be ready after a lease thing fell through. 7 nights in a mid-tier extended stay motel alone, with too much time and a kitchenette I never used. That's the context. I'm a nurse. I've worked trauma ER for 6 years. I tell you that because I need you to understand that I am not jumpy. I've seen things that would give most people nightmares for years, and I go home, eat dinner, watch TV, and sleep. I'm wired to stay calm. So when I say this scared me, I mean it actually scared me. The motel was fine, perfectly normal, by the standard of places where nobody wants to be. Clean enough, a pool I never used, a small business center with 2 computers. The staff was professional. My room was on the 2nd floor, room 208, end of the corridor. I was there for work. Essentially, we just opened a new wing at the hospital, and I was pulling extra shifts during the transition. I came back to the room, slept, left, didn't pay much attention to anything. On my 3rd night there, I noticed the whiteboard. In the corridor outside my room, in the small alcove near the vending machines, there was a dry erase whiteboard on the wall. I'd assumed it was for staff notes or directions or something. I hadn't paid attention to it. But on the 3rd night, when I came back from a 12-hour shift at around 1:20 a.m., I walked past it and something made me look. There was a name written on it in black marker. The name was Denise. That's my name. Now, I'm not saying that's automatically sinister. Denise is a common enough name. Another guest could have written it for any reason. Maybe another Denise lived down the hall. Maybe it was a joke or a note someone forgot to erase. I stood there for a minute looking at it and felt the back of my neck go strange, and then I told myself I was overtired and went to bed. The next night I checked the whiteboard on my way in. It had been erased. Blank. On my 5th night, I'm talking about 3 days later, I walked past the vending alcove at 12:47 a.m., and the whiteboard said, Denise 208, my room number. I stood there for, 20 seconds, just looking at it. The corridor was empty. The motel was quiet. My first thought was actually, I must be reading it wrong. I moved closer. I was not reading it wrong. Denise 208, in the same black marker, same handwriting as before, neat block letters. I went straight to the front desk and knocked on the glass. The desk closes at midnight, but there's a window. The night clerk, a young guy named Marcus, came out looking half asleep. I showed him a photo I'd taken on my phone. He told me he didn't know who wrote it, that the whiteboard was for guest messages and the cleaning staff sometimes used it, but that he hadn't put it there and didn't know who had. He erased it while I watched. I went back to my room and checked that the chain lock was on. I checked the window. I moved one of the chairs in front of the door, not because it would stop anyone, but because I'd hear it fall if someone came in. I didn't sleep until almost 5 a.m. I should have checked out, I know. I want to be clear that I understand, in hindsight, that I should have packed my bag that night and gone to a different motel. The reason I didn't was that my apartment was ready in 2 days, and I kept telling myself I was making something out of nothing. Someone wrote a name and a room number and it happened to be mine. That happens. Probably. I rationalized it hard enough to stay, and I'm not proud of it. Day 6. I was off shift and had spent most of the day in the room watching shows on my laptop. Around 7:30 p.m., I went downstairs to get a soda from the vending machine. I walked past the whiteboard. Nothing on it. I got my soda and came back. 60 seconds maybe. 90 at most. The whiteboard said, "Why won't you talk to me?" I turned around and looked down the corridor in both directions. Empty. I looked toward the stairwell. Empty. I stood there for what felt like a long time, but was probably 10 seconds, and then I went back to the front desk, not the night window. It was still early, and I told the woman at the desk everything. The first message, the second message, and now this one. I showed her all 3 photos. She called the manager, he was on property, and came out within a few minutes. He reviewed the corridor camera footage with me in the back office. The camera covered the vending alcove at an angle. It was good enough. Between the time I walked past at 7:28 p.m. and when I returned at 7:30 p.m., a person had walked up to the board, written the message, and left the frame, unhurried, like it was nothing. Here's what the camera showed us. A white woman, maybe late 40s or early 50s, medium height, wearing a green cardigan and carrying a large tan purse. She walked up, uncapped a marker, wrote the message, recapped the marker, and walked toward the stairwell. She was not a registered guest. The manager checked. No one matching her description was staying at the motel. The exterior cameras showed a car parked in the lot for about 40 minutes. Too far for a plate. That was gone by the time they checked. I don't know how she knew my name. The motel had my name on file at check-in, but that's not public information. I don't know how she knew my room number. I don't know who she was or what she wanted. The manager moved me to a new room, first floor, different wing, under a different name on the system. He offered to comp the remaining nights, and I took him up on it. A police report was filed. I don't know what happened after that. Nobody followed up with me. I moved into my apartment 2 days later, and I've never been back to an extended stay motel alone. I booked hotels with interior corridor access only. I don't put my real name in the guest comment fields online anymore. Probably doesn't matter. I don't know how she got it in the first place. The question I still think about, why the whiteboard? She clearly knew who I was and where I was staying. She could have just knocked on my door. She didn't. She chose a method that was public, that I might see before or after, that felt like, I don't know, a game, like she was enjoying the setup more than any outcome. That's the part I can't let go. I'm not someone who gets spooked easily. I've been a long-haul driver for 11 years, and in that time I've slept in truck stops, parking lots, crumbling roadside motels, places that would make most people turn around at the front door. You build up a tolerance for it. The smell of old carpet, the AC unit that rattles like something's loose inside it, the walls so thin you hear the person next door snoring. None of that bothers me. It's just part of the job. This was late October, northern Kentucky, somewhere off I-75 near a town I'd driven through 100 times but couldn't name on a map. I had a delivery the next morning and I was behind on sleep, so I pulled into the first motel with a lit sign. The place was called the Ridgeline Inn, which sounded nicer than it was. 2 floors, exterior walkways, maybe 30 rooms. The parking lot had 4 vehicles in it, including mine. Slow night. The woman at the desk was maybe 60, had a daytime soap opera running on a small TV behind her, and handed me a room key on a plastic fob without looking up. Room 114, ground floor, second from the end. She said the ice machine was out, and the diner across the street closed at 9. I told her that was fine. She went back to her show. Room 114 smelled like stale cigarettes, covered up with a synthetic lavender spray, which I actually prefer to just stale cigarettes, so I considered it a win. I checked the lock, habit, threw my bag on the luggage rack, and was asleep by 9:15. At 12:47 a.m., I woke up to a sound from the room next to mine, room 116. I know the time because I checked my phone when I woke up. I always do, because I'm paranoid about missing my alarm. The sound was a TV, I thought. Muffled voices, the rhythm of conversation. I figured someone had checked in late. I pulled the pillow over my ear and went back to sleep. I was back out by 12:51. I remember that too. Then at 2:09 a.m., I woke up again. This time it wasn't a TV. It was movement, a slow, deliberate dragging sound, like furniture being pushed across carpet inch by inch. I laid there for a minute just listening. It went on for about 30 seconds, then stopped, then started again. I told myself they were probably rearranging the room. Weird thing to do at 2 in the morning, but people do weird things when they travel. I'd checked into a room once to find the bed pushed against the window and all the hangers on the floor. People are strange. I talked myself back down and fell asleep sometime around 2:30. At 3:44 a.m., the door between our rooms rattled. I should explain the layout. Rooms 114 and 116 had an adjoining door, the kind you see in family suites, where 2 rooms can be connected or sealed off depending on what the guests want. My side had a deadbolt latch on it. I'd noticed it when I checked in and made sure it was locked. The door on the other side, room 116 side, had its own separate latch, which I had no control over. So when I heard the handle on that door move at 3:44 a.m., I sat straight up in bed. It wasn't a bump or a settling noise. The handle depressed, held for 2 or 3 seconds, and then released. I stared at the door from across the room. It didn't open. My latch held, but I could see the handle had moved. The door bowed slightly inward at the top, like someone was pressing against it and testing the seal. Then it stopped. I should have called the front desk. I know that. Looking back, I should have called right then, or called 911, or done anything except what I actually did, which was grab my flashlight, check that my latch was engaged, sit back against the headboard, and wait. I told myself it was probably someone who got confused about which room they were in, or a kid messing around. I told myself that for about 20 minutes while I sat there in the dark watching that door. At 4:02 a.m. I heard breathing. Not through the door, through the wall. The walls in that motel were drywall over cheap framing, and someone was standing close enough to the 116 side of the wall that I could hear them. Long, slow breaths. I'm not exaggerating when I say it sounded like someone standing right on the other side of the drywall with their face near the surface. Just breathing. Not labored, not panicked. Steady. Patient. That was when I got scared. Not movie scared, the real kind, where your body decides before your brain does. I was on my feet before I thought about it, phone in hand, backing toward the exterior door of my room. I called the front desk and got no answer. I called 911. I told the dispatcher there was someone in the room next to me acting strange, that they'd tried the adjoining door and that I could hear them through the wall. She told me to stay in my room and keep the exterior door locked. A unit would be there in 10 minutes. They were there in 7. 2 officers went to room 116. I watched from my doorway. The room was unlocked. The key hadn't been used after check-in. The system showed the door card last swiped at 6:14 p.m. by the housekeeping staff during turnover. Nobody had checked into that room, but someone had been in it. The officers told me this. The furniture had been moved. The desk had been pushed up against the adjoining door from the 116 side. Not to barricade it. It was too short for that, but it was directly under the door, like someone had been standing on it, to look through the gap at the top of the doorframe. There was a small space there, maybe half an inch, enough to see through. They couldn't find anyone. The window in 116 was unlocked and showed marks in the window frame like it had been opened recently. Whoever had been in that room was gone. The officers told the woman at the front desk. She looked shaken in a way that made me think she wasn't as surprised as she should have been. She moved me to a room on the second floor. I didn't sleep. I filed a report the next morning before I left. I don't know if anything came of it. Nobody called me. I still take long-haul jobs, but I'm different about where I stop now. I don't care if I'm exhausted. If a motel doesn't have a solid door and no adjoining rooms, I keep driving. I've paid for rooms I didn't sleep in just because I checked in and saw that door. My dispatcher thinks I'm being dramatic. I don't care what he thinks. What I think about sometimes is the time gap. The furniture was moved and the housekeeping stamp was at 6:14 p.m. I checked in around 9. That's almost 3 hours unaccounted for. Either someone came in after housekeeping and before me, or they came in sometime in the night through that window. Either way, someone moved that desk to see through the door gap and then stood in the dark beside my wall and breathed until I called the police. I don't know who it was. I don't know what they wanted. I'm glad I latched my side.